Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The memo has come and gone, but this controversy is far from over. The political bias of the deep state has been revealed and illegal activities exposed. Who, if anyone, will be held responsible? Cross-talking the memo, I'm joined by my guest, Mark Sloboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. We also have Victor Olevich. He is a political analyst as well as a leading expert at the Center for Actual Politics. And we have Dmitry Babich. He is a political analyst with Sputnik International. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. We're going to talk about, this is kind of a post-mortem here. It might be a very long one, depending on how events unfold here. Let me just give real quickly for our viewers here 6 takeaways, most important takeaways from the memo that was recently released by the GOP regarding FISA warrant violations.
From the House Intelligence Committee.
House Intelligence Committee. Hillary Clinton and the DNC hired a foreign spy to concoct a fake dossier on Trump. The Clinton campaign and the DNC gave fake dossier to Obama, DOJ, and FBI. The Department of Justice and FBI knew that the dossier was fake and politically motivated. The Department of Justice and the FBI present fake dossier to FISA court to get Trump wiretap. We're talking about Carter Page in this case. The DOJ and the FBI don't tell the FISA court that the dossier is fake and from Trump's political opponent, and the FISA court defrauded into ordering wiretapping of the Trump campaign. Again, Carter Page here. Victor, this is devastating, okay? Devastating. There is, well, 6 smoking guns at the very least, and from what I understand, this is, I hate using the term tip of the iceberg, but what the intelligence community made available through the White House was approximately 10%. There's a lot of underlying evidence that can be released that was based on these 6 points.
Look at the irony of the situation. The American intelligence community accused Russia of interfering in the election process in the United States, while in reality there is not a single fact. There is no base, there is no factual base for saying that at all. Russia did not interfere in American elections, but the American intelligence community that made those accusations directly interfered, illegally, unconstitutionally interfered in the American political process. And this memo outlines parts of that interference, not all of it. We know of other instances of how they interfered, and it shows what role the American intelligence community is playing in the American society, an unconstitutional role.
You know, Mark, what's really interesting to me when I read the 4 pages plus the 1.5 pages from the White House, I have to pat us all on the back. We basically got it all right.
Yeah,
we basically connected all of the dots.
That's what I wanted to say. Is actually there's very little new here.
Yeah.
Very little. We have been saying all of this for a long time. It is a partial confirmation because, of course, the Democrats, the FBI, a whole host of former deep state officials from the liar James Clapper on down came out and declared that releasing this was an attack on democracy,
attack on
security,
security,
to our national security. The heavens would fall. Well, I think the U.S. is still there. Last time I checked, anyway, after the release of this memo.
But Dima, what the interesting thing was, and the flip side of what Mark is saying is that it was a threat to national security. It's an affront to our intelligence agency, to law enforcement. It used to be the liberals that used to be very worried about law enforcement. Everything is flipped over right now. Okay,
exactly.
But the interesting thing is, immediately after it was released, I don't know if anybody, these liberals or CNN or MSNBC actually read it, but then they just said it's nothing to see here.
Yes.
Move along. How could within one news cycle it was a threat to national security, then move along, nothing to see here?
Well, I think what we should prevent from happening here is this let's move on attitude prevailing again, because we understand where it comes from. Trump is basically leading the same policies now as Hillary Clinton and Obama had been leading before Trump was elected, right? He struck at Syria. He published this awful nuclear posture review, right? So he is basically moving the country towards war, moving humanity towards destruction. So now they are prepared to let it be,
Well, I think they're prepared to let it be for very different reasons here. Victor, I mean, you have the former director of the FBI, I mean, I watched the hearings. He perjured himself repeatedly. Okay, and I'm sorry, let's make sure, I wonder, Mike Flynn, was he watching, or did he read the memo? Did Paul Manafort read the memo too? They're indicted, okay? But we have a whole cast of characters at the DOJ and the FBI that perjured themselves in front of committees under oath.
What is outrageous?
Dima, you can't walk away from that.
James Clapper did. Obama's director of national intelligence did it twice under oath.
Okay, and maybe he did it on other occasions.
What is really outrageous here is James Comey going to Twitter and proclaiming himself a victim, alike to the victims of Joe McCarthy. Comey, Mueller, Rosenstein, these are the loving descendants of Joe McCarthy. And they are
let me put the can I put the cherry on top, okay, gentlemen? Okay. Headline from the New York Times, the failing New York Times. Trump's unparalleled war on a pillar of society, law enforcement. I mean, this is Orwellian. I mean, from what I read from those 4 pages, that the deep state is at war with the democratically elected government or president of the United States. That is the assault that's going on right now. This is so duplicitous. It is so hypocritical. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest accusations is it's starting to undermine Americans' trust in their intelligence community. I don't know. I can't speak for all of you out there, but I've been doubting our intelligence community since the Iraq War, since the Gulf of Tonkin, from the Libyan genocide. To the Spanish-American War and detonating ships.
In fact, if I could for a minute about the Foreign Intelligence Court that this memo deals with, the whole reason for setting up FISA, the court, was to prevent the abuses that the American intelligence community did in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s. So post-Watergate, America decided to create this act. And what do we see now? We see that, first of all, let's go back to how this court functions. If we look at its record of this court, the vast majority, almost every single episode.
99.3%,
yes,
something like that.
99.8%.
Okay.
This is a secret court that hears secret arguments about how our intelligence community wants to spy on American citizens. They approve 99.8% of cases brought against it. No credible oversight or
it's a rubber stamp
check
court.
On authority. It's a rubber stamp secret court, and they're spying on American citizens. And this is they bring obviously fraudulent evidence in front of it. This is the important criminal thing.
But you're right. But I mean, let's finish it. The thread here. Spying on American citizens. A citizen who is working for a political campaign for a presidential candidate. I mean, this was the whole reason that the FISA courts were put up, to make sure something like this would happen. And actually, because of the way it was set up, we have Comey and we have the rest of them. They know how to go around it.
Let's be perfectly clear about this. No one of these people seriously believed that Carter Page or George Papadopoulos, these bumbling intern idiots, were Russian agents. This was an attempt to use their bumbling to get intelligence wiretaps inside the Trump campaign.
It's true. Well, what I find especially astonishing about this whole story is that FISA warrant was based on a story written by Michael Isikoff on Yahoo. And Michael
Where did he get the story from?
Took his facts from Christopher Steele. So the story is that DNC campaign pays Christopher Steele so that he would dig dirt on Trump, like him going to Moscow hotels, meeting with prostitutes there, sleeping on Obama's former bed, in a hotel. Then Michael Isikoff takes an interview from this guy, and then FISA decides, the whole puzzle fits together. There is a conspiracy against the United States.
But we do also know that the FISA court was not made aware of the origins and the author of this dossier. Okay,
And
they also were not told this article that was in Yahoo News was also connected to Callisto.
I could correct them very easily. You know, let the FISA court just read Michael Isakov's stories about Russia.
I think we should.
It tells us that the evidence was so shabby that even this rubber stamp court had to be lied to get the warrant. It's that bad. It's that bad.
We should stress this again. This was the evidence put forward to wiretap an American citizen who was working for Trump's campaign or had recently stopped working in the case of Carter Page, that when it was renewed, that they not only used this dodgy opposition research tabloid scandal news from a foreign spook that the U.S. intelligence community itself says has minimal corroborability, meaning it's complete, horse fodder. But to back it up, they used a Yahoo news story that is talking to the same people, references the same document. I mean, the biggest shock to most of us might be that Yahoo is still out there. And by
the way, Michael Isakov has a book coming on this very subject. I wonder if he's going to have to do some rewording there and change editing.
He wrote a number of books on Russia, on the Middle East. You know, just read his stories on Russia and the Middle East. He's an extremely unobjective journalist. But I just loved what FISA actually believed. So FISA warrant mentioned information on George Papadopoulos. Which one? Papadopoulos told an Australian diplomat in a London bar that a Maltese professor connected to Russia had told him he had dirt on Clinton. Well, even Stalin's secret police would not accept it. You know, like you talk to someone in a London bar who was from Malta and who reportedly had connections to Russia.
It sounds like a really bad script, Hollywood script here. Gentlemen, we're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the memo. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the memo. All right, gentlemen, let's continue with the memo, but I want to change a different path here. Watching MSNBC, CNN, they're absolutely giving complete cover. I saw one segment with Wolf Blitzer talking, I think it was to a congressman, and he kept talking about his issue was, well, why didn't you release it at the same time? Because the Democrats are going to have one. And finally, the congressman was quite polite. He said, well, can we talk about the contents of the memo instead of the timing of a memo we don't know much about because it hasn't been completely written, okay? This is the tactic. Again, nothing to see, move along. But they're giving cover to it, like I gave the New York Times title right here. They don't want to talk about it. A lot of people are talking about it, and it has amazing implications here.
The real potential criminality, and there is actual, not just misuse of authority here, questions, but there is a potential criminality in if there was false presentation of evidence to the FISA, the secret court, when the FBI investigation was requesting wiretaps on Carter Page. That's the potential for criminality. But it has to be said, of course, the Democrats, the neocons, are completely denying. They say that things are being taken out of context. Now, they put forward kind of a rebuttal memo headed by Adam Schiff. That's been blocked by the Trump administration. That should not be blocked. Let's have all of this out in the open.
No, because it isn't just like the GOP memo. It was scoured and it was checked. Okay, the Democrats haven't done their homework yet.
It should be made public, as
I think it should be.
All of the underlying evidence, which is clearly not any threat to national security, right, as indicated in this memo, all the underlying evidence should be unclassified and made public. And this is where the hypocrisy of the Republicans comes in, because they just 2 weeks ago renewed the same FISA powers that they claim have been abused here.
And
Democrats, Republicans together.
And there was no discussion. There was no debate about it.
They handed these powers to Trump that the Democrats say, is a tyrant, a despot, so on. The Republicans, meanwhile, are talking about the deep state, which, of course, is also a threat, but they don't have a problem renewing the powers either. So there's a bit of hypocrisy on both sides here. All the evidence needs to be made available to the public to see this.
Victor, what about the Mueller investigation? I mean, if this is, 10% of the underlying, and this is according to the GOP, let's be fair, what does the Russia investigation have two legs to stand on right now?
Look, Robert Mueller and those who put him in that place where he is right now are dead set on removing the elected president of the United States. And they're going to try to do their best to go through this and to reach their goal despite all the obstacles that are put in their path.
They're going to need a paddy wagon to pick up a lot of people. What is it, from the fourth floor of the FBI? I mean, there's a lot of people involved right now.
Really,
I mean, one of the reasons I'm asking this is that given the media cover that the deep state is being given here, I mean, this is a growing confrontation. We have documentation, people under oaths in front of Congress during interviews have lied. Okay, and it can't stop right there. Rosenstein is still sitting in his office right now.
Yes, in fact,
one has to wonder what he's doing.
In the entire history of the FBI, not a single director of that agency, not a single director of the CIA, of the NSA, ever went to prison. And it's not because they never abused power. It's not because they never committed crimes, according to the American Constitution, American Criminal Code. But it's because the power they exercise in the American society, in the American political order, is so overwhelming that they are essentially above the law.
But it's been revealed this time, okay? We've seen behind the curtain here. Dima, this is a growing crisis here because, there's enough evidence here to put a lot of doubt. And let's be clear here. I don't want to repeat the same mantra that I keep hearing, but the good people at the FBI. I am not going to say that because I don't know, okay?
Straight shooters. They're all straight shooters.
Well,
do you notice that?
Yeah, but the interesting thing here, this is really, again, when we started out, Mark, at the end of the Obama administration, changing all of those regulations about having access to classified information, unmasking and whatnot. I mean, this is falling solely on the administration that just left office. Okay, the Obama administration. True. All of these people that we're talking about are his appointees. Okay, this is coming to a head right here. What? I mean, I may differ on with Victor here. I think this is an opportunity for Trump. Not that I necessarily like him very much, but this would be an opportunity for him to clean house, and he may have justification for these reasons.
And that's what they're afraid of. I mean, look what...
Of course, they're terrified of it.
Look what the Washington Post writes about it. They're not afraid that people were actually lying under oath. They're afraid that President Trump may lash out with Nixonian ferocity at the Justice Department and the FBI. Well, Nixon was lashing out.
Yeah, and let's make it very clear here. Something the media does is it casts this unbelievable shadow around the President of the United States. The President of the United States can fire anybody he wants in the executive branch, and he doesn't need a reason. He can do it.
Yes, for more than a year, the media has been trying to delegitimize Trump and his administration. They have been doing it every day, every hour, and every minute of their coverage. And they're going to continue doing it until they believe that they have reached their goal. But, of course, even Nancy Pelosi, in the last few days, admitted that a constitutional crisis is possible in the very near future in the United States because of the situation developing now. Because really, as you said correctly, it's a train wreck coming.
What we had, Mark, here,
constitutional crisis,
but
we know the right to fire Rosenstein.
What was it? Who was it who said it? Was it Clapper? There's 6 ways to Sunday to get you. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a threat here, and so we have. And the DOJ and the FBI absolutely have resources to defend themselves, but they're defending themselves against the Constitution. This is the crisis that I'm talking about.
Well, of course, they see themselves as performing a noble act, right? I mean, that
Peter struck all those messages to his girlfriend. Right. Yes, very noble people.
So the FBI, whose officials perjured themselves to the FISA court in order to get the warrant approved, then are charging Carter Page Papadopoulos with lying about things that actually weren't criminal to begin with. But I think there's two details in these documents that really struck out at me. They're not pivotal towards criminality, but they speak to a wider conspiracy. One is Bruce Orr's wife. He is the Deputy Attorney General.
And similar with McCabe.
She works for Fusion GPS, and she worked specifically on getting this dodgy dossier, this tabloid sheet, presented to the FBI, and she continued contacts even after all of this nonsense was over with. Similarly, Andrew McCabe, whose name is signatory on all these FISA documents, he is the former FBI assistant director who just resigned when all of this came out in the last couple of weeks. His wife ran for office, Virginia State Senate, as a Democrat, getting $700,000 from Clinton allies. This is all, of course, such ridiculous conflicts of interest.
Nothing to see there.
Right?
Nothing
to see there.
But I like the
it does speak to a wider, conspiracy.
Yeah. I like the comment from the New York Times about all of this. The Republicans' assertion that investigators might have lied about Mr. Steele is potentially problematic. But this is nothing compared to a constitutional crisis that may be unleashed by the White House if it decides to fire Mueller or, as now seems likely, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah, but General Flynn, speaking to the FBI without a lawyer, it wasn't recorded. It is what the memory of the interrogators. The New York Times would never call that problematic.
No, he was a traitor anyway, so he would have to be caught,
Look, it was similar to as if you were, for example, accused of grand larceny, you were dragged into an interrogation, and the investigator would find out you had nothing to do with that. But in the course of your interview, you would say that, let's say, last Thursday you went to the supermarket to buy milk, and they checked your check from the supermarket and it said you bought orange juice, so you lied under oath.
Yes.
And
grand jury, now!
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I also like the accusation against this Nunes report that they cherry-pick facts, right? The fact that Obama, in May 2016, promised G7 leaders that Trump would not become the president of the United States, this elephant in the room is never mentioned, right? The fact that 95% of the mainstream media supported Hillary Clinton is never mentioned.
One of the things, Dima, that we need to find out in the rest of the 90% here is the importance of these FISA warrants are of such a level of importance that one has to assume that the President of the United States was aware during his briefings in the morning. I think we're going to find that out if he was aware of this here on the back end of what you were just saying there. Go ahead, Mark.
My prize of the week goes to John McCain. John McCain, out of the most desperate of all the desperate attempts to try to wash over this, to try to discredit the memo, he said there's only one person that benefits from this memo.
And we can say it in unison.
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, you win the Neil McCarthyite prize of the week.
Those are probably going to be the last words John McCain goes away from us.
Patrick Buchanan, speaking in The American Conservative, I think summed the whole thing up very well. This is from The American Conservative, former U.S. presidential candidate Patrick Buchanan. Trump haters in the press may be terrified that the memo may credibly demonstrate that the deplorables were right, that the elite media have been had, that they were exploited and used by the deep state, that they let their detestation of Trump so blind them to reality that they made fools of themselves, and they credited with high nobility a major conspiracy to overthrow an elected president of the United States.
And despite all that came out in the last few days, the deep state and Robert Mueller and others, they will not stop. They will attempt to go on. They will try to go on and accomplish their goal of removing an elected American president.
It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be...
even if we don't like him.
This is a dangerous time to be living in.
I view this situation from a bird's eye, right? I think that the deep state and in general, this ultra-liberal ideology which is ruling the United States, if Trump approves the nuclear posture, if he moves towards a nuclear war, if he is...
Okay, Dean, I'm going to jump in here. Gentlemen, we've run out of time for this. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. This is the end of our broadcast segment. Stay with us for the extended version on our YouTube channel. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules. Okay, welcome to our extended version of our program where we talk about political potpourri. Mark, what's on your mind?
Turkey and Syria. I mean, that's always forefront of mind. In the last few hours before coming to the show, we have seen a Russian fighter pilot, Su-25 pilot, shot down. He was a Crimean Russian. He had originally served in the Ukrainian Air Force, and when the Westpac putsch overthrew the Ukrainian government, he defected, served in the Russian Air Force. He's from Simferopol, my wife's hometown. He was shot down and then killed on the ground by Turkish-backed jihadis. And these are the same jihadis, the same Turkish-backed jihadis that this week in Afrin, while attacking the Kurds, they committed atrocities. And even Western mainstream writers who are pro, or shall we say anti-Assad from the beginning, are talking that Erdogan obviously intends on ethnic cleansing Afrin and pretty much all of North Syria. A female Kurdish fighter was captured. She was raped. Her breasts were cut off. She was dragged behind of a truck. Then the Turkish-backed jihadis that did this were talking over her body about how beautiful she was. And they filmed themselves doing this because they think it's good propaganda. This is the type of these are the irregulars, right, that the Turkish military is inserting into Afrin Kenton right now. And they are a serious problem. Al-Qaeda officially claimed credit for shooting down this fighter. The same Al-Qaeda that Turkey is now, according to the mainstream press, doing joint patrols with in Idlib. They're in complete control of Idlib. And these, but the actual group under the Al-Qaeda umbrella was formerly backed by Obama's CIA and given advanced weapons. We know they were given advanced tow weapons. Were they also given anti-aircraft weapons?
I don't think it's hard to figure out where they got those weapons from.
Look, the situation in Syria is complex. And of course, there are many players. At this point, the Kurds are being supported by the United States.
Not the Kurds in Afrin. They have never been backed by the United States.
Well, actually, Rojava, the leftist Kurds, have been backed by the United States. It's a pro-American project that is also backed by Israeli interests. And of course, Russia is not interested in any carnage there. Russia is not interested in any violence there. But Turkey, Iran and Iran are playing an important role in calming the situation in Syria. They are playing an important role in pacifying Syria, in making sure, yes, it's a complex issue. Yes, there are groups that are loyal to different countries.
How can you say with a straight face that Turkey is calming the situation in Syria? They evaded the country again. They're bombing Syrian cities. They're openly collaborating with Al-Qaeda. How is that stabilizing the situation in Syria?
Well, first of all, those parts of Syria, like Afrin, where the Turkish forces are acting, they are acting against those Kurdish interests that are aligned with the United States. In fact,
those Kurds have been fighting the same jihadis that the Syrian military and Russia have been fighting for 6 years.
Those Kurds are first and foremost trying to fight the Syrian government.
They have never fought the Syrian government. They have never fought the Syrian government.
First and foremost, they're interested in independence.
Well, they certainly, have their own agenda.
Of course, their agenda is independence. Their agenda is independence from Syria, and it threatens Turkey.
And that agenda is not aligned with Damascus, okay? There may be some points of overlap, some points.
It is aligned with Washington at this point.
Well, that's for sure.
Well, I think I can kind of summarize it by saying that the group that actually shot down the plane, Jaish al-Nasr, is a jihadist group, and I'm sure this will be investigated, and the Russian military just won't let it be. You know, they won't let it.
They've already retaliated.
With cruise missiles.
But looking at the general situation, I mean, in the Cold War, during the Cold War, the U.S. allies didn't fight each other, and you know, there was this saying from Margaret Thatcher: "Two democracies never fight each other. Our allies never fight each other." Right? Okay, in the last few months, we have seen Turkey basically fighting the American-backed Kurds. We have seen the Polish and the Ukrainian parliaments actually banning each other's ideologies. You know, what happened this week was that the Polish parliament passed a bill that makes it illegal to deny the massacre of Poles by the Ukrainian insurgent army, and penalizes during the Second World War, penalizes any praise for the Ukrainian insurgent army. The problem is that the Ukrainian parliament
are they both democracies?
Yes, they are both democracies, liberal democracies. Yes. The problem is that in Ukraine, the parliament about 2 years ago passed a bill that makes it illegal to criticize the Ukrainian insurgent army, the same people who killed the Poles. So we have the two allies of the United States and of the European Union outlawing each other's ideologies. And when you ask them, who is your enemy, they both say Russia.
Calling Ukraine a liberal democracy is a misnomer of the first order anyways.
I would agree.
That's what the American media calls it.
Well, I'm sorry, gentlemen. I don't believe that the United States is a democracy anymore, okay? I mean...
democracy is a facade.
Well,
it's a facade.
You know, one of the things I always say about this, you know, and you know, Americans look at democracy as a secular religion. For the rest of the world, it's a process, okay? And so this is one of the problems here. On CrossTalk a few days ago, we had a Turkish guest, and he said, a very nice gentleman, but he said, you know, America's military presence in Syria would promote liberal values. Which I was really, you know, I wanted to be polite, but I mean, militaries don't usually do that kind of thing. With bombs, and with drones, and you know, Mark's 31 flavors of jihad.
Look at the incredible democratic successes in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan.
There you go.
Well, let me.
How can you refute that liberal insertion of values?
Okay, so you can have Libya. We'll have one of these new studies here, Libyan democracy studies. Okay,
there's another issue.
But let me give you a more recent example. Okay. You know, the U.S. ambassador, after this week, the United States Department of Treasury published the list of Putin's
I'm
people.
glad you mentioned this. Good,
yes,
good.
The American ambassador went around the top Russian people.
You're talking about the Kremlin list. Okay,
exactly. So the American ambassador, John Hartman, went around the top Russian people, like the head of the Duma, the head of the Federation Council, saying, don't take this list too seriously. Don't over-dramatize it. Well, sorry, you know, the Russian prime minister, the top, all of the Russian government, all of the top Russian businessmen are in this list, and they should not worry about it. The list is inside the law, which is called Countering America's Adversaries with Sanctions Act. It's not called Teasing America's Friends with Idiotic Blacklists Act, right?
And they're supposed
not to take it seriously.
Putin, the rumor is Putin was a little offended he wasn't put on his own list.
There's even more to that, because one of the several of the people who have been on real American sanctions lists and the European sanctions lists for years now, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia has been invited to Washington and met with the heads of the CIA. And the head of the Federal Security Service, Bortnikov, was also in Washington last week.
Mike Pompeo colluded!
And the head of the Russian military intelligence, Korobov, also was in Washington last week to meet with the head of the American military intelligence.
They're there to deliver orders, right?
So they got exceptions from the sanctions.
This non-sanctioned sanctions list, right? It's meant to comply with this Countering American Adversaries Act that Congress tried to dictate foreign policy over Trump in order to ruin any possible détente with Russia. It's not actually a sanctions list. It's simply Trump chose not to actually imply sanctions, so it's just supposed to smear them. It identifies a number of Russian officials and what they call Russian oligarchs as being close to Putin and tries to smear them and prevent them from doing business in the West this way. This list
is Forbes.
The government portion was cut and pasted from the Russian government's own website in English, and the oligarchs are just simply a rehashing of Forbes' list of rich people, billionaires,
when
in Russia.
When the word oligarch is used concerning successful Russian businessmen, when we look at the successful American businessmen,
George Soros,
is the Bush family, are they not oligarchs? Is Trump himself not an oligarch?
Yeah.
Are the Kennedys not oligarchs?
The Koch brothers.
Let me give you a very easy solution to this problem. You know, if you follow the ultra-liberal ideology, if you support the policy of the United States, then you are a tycoon. If you ever object, you're an oligarch.
With a monopoly mustache and all.
But the funny thing about this oligarchs list is that they included there a guy, Yuri Shefler, who doesn't live in Russia, who is actually wanted by the Russian justice because he produces counterfeit vodka in Latvia. He lives in London for many years now, but he is declared a part of Putin's war machine.
What's the story here about how the rich Russians in Britain now are going to have to
reveal
their
got
wealth?
their
Yeah.
Well,
they're no longer tycoons, they're oligarchs.
Well, Russia is actually, there are a number of...
I'd like to know where the money went.
Actually, there's another process that's going on right now. A number of successful Russian businessmen who have fled Russia because of criminal charges because of corruption. Yes, and who now live in London and some other European cities.
Oh, but they were persecuted by Putin.
But now they're actually asking Russia to let them come back and take the charges away.
If one of them is on that list, if Yuri Shefler, that vodka magnate wanted by Russian justice, if he is a part of Putin's war machine, then I can only sing, we are all part of Putin's war machine, Putin's war machine, Putin's war machine.
This is the irony.
Someone's going to turn that into a meme, Dima.
This is the irony of all of this. While the Western press are all salivating at the idea that the Russian businessmen, the oligarchs, will turn on Putin because they want to do business with the West and they'll overthrow the government, right? What the Russian people are actually saying to the West over these non-sanctioned sanctions and this latest British move is thank you. We wanted our wealth repatriated out of these Western because London is basically an illegal tax haven. It's a big pirate haven for wealth from around the world. We wanted our money repatriated. You are helping the Kremlin to force these businessmen, pressure them, scare them into repatriating their wealth.
Well, that was well thought out, as usual. Go ahead, Victor. Last word.
The main thing that these types of sanctions are accomplishing is further consolidating the Russian political and business elites. Because if you look at the people on the latest list, it's the liberals and conservatives. It's people from all walks of life who are there in
very different convictions.
And this really consolidates them.
This is the American government, particularly.
Got to do something.
No. But it's the America's democracy is making Russia great.
Yes.
Again. All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we had. To our audience here, we hope you enjoyed this extended version of our program, and we'll see you next week. Remember, CrossTalk rules.